The night was drenched in whispers. Cameras flashed like restless stars, and the crowd pulsed with a rhythm that was half adoration, half hunger. In the middle of it all stood Wang Yibo, poised but burning, his expression unreadable to the thousands who watched yet transparent to the one person who knew him best. Xiao Zhan. It began as a rumor, a cruel twist of headlines that painted Xiao Zhan as fragile glass about to shatter. Scandal after scandal, voices shouting louder than his own truth, the world demanding he bow, apologize, disappear. And through it all, the unspoken pressure on Yibo was heavy, urging him to step back, to remain untouchable, to protect his rising empire by severing ties. But when the moment came, when the air thickened with judgment and the world leaned forward to see if he would walk away, Wang Yibo did the opposite. The stage was glittering with sharp lights, the atmosphere buzzing with restless expectation. Xiao Zhan's shoulders trembled under the weight of silence as he stood alone in front of an ocean of flashing eyes. His name had been dragged through storms, and tonight was supposed to be the quiet burial of what remained of him. He bowed his head, a single bead of sweat trailing down his temple, his lips parting as though to speak, yet no words came. Then, like a blade of light cutting through suffocating shadow, Yibo moved. He did not hesitate, did not glance at the anxious managers who shook their heads, nor at the sponsors whispering warnings from the shadows. His boots struck the stage with an unflinching rhythm, each step echoing like a drumbeat of defiance. When he reached Xiao Zhan, he did not stop at a respectable distance. He stood close, too close for comfort, close enough for the cameras to capture the electricity in the air. Gasps rippled across the hall. Xiao Zhan's head lifted, eyes wide, glistening like a man both relieved and terrified at once. Yibo's gaze locked on him, unwavering, as though the entire world had dissolved into background noise. Without a word, he reached out and took Xiao Zhan's trembling hand. The gesture was so simple, so raw, yet it felt like thunder splitting the night sky. The audience froze. Journalists leaned forward, mouths open, pens stilled midair. Somewhere, a camera shutter clicked endlessly, desperate to trap this impossible moment in photographs. Yibo's hand tightened, firm and unyielding, grounding Xiao Zhan where he stood. It was more than comfort, it was declaration. And Xiao Zhan broke. Tears slipped free, uninvited yet unstoppable, tracing lines of salt down his flushed cheeks. 4 days, weeks, he had stood alone, enduring storms that tore at his dignity. Yet here, in front of strangers and friends alike, Yibo had refused the script written for him. He had chosen him, not in whispers, not behind closed doors, but in the blazing light of the public eye. The silence was unbearable, and then, like a swell of waves, the murmurs began. Some cried betrayal, some gasped at the audacity, and some, quiet voices trembling, whispered about love. Real love, unafraid and uncompromising. Yibo's lips curved, not into a smile, but into something deeper, something carved from truth. He leaned slightly, so only Xiao Zhan could hear him above the storm of noise. "They can take everything from me," he murmured, voice low but fierce, "but they won't take me from you." Xiao Zhan's knees nearly gave way. He wanted to hide his face, to shield this moment from the hungry eyes watching, but Yibo's presence held him steady. Yibo did not let go. His hand remained warm, anchoring him against the tide of judgment. As the host stuttered, the program faltered, and producers scrambled for control, Yibo did the unthinkable. He turned, still holding Xiao Zhan's hand, and faced the cameras. His eyes, usually cool and distant, were aflame with resolve. He did not speak. Words would have been too fragile, but his stance, his defiance, his closeness to Xiao Zhan spoke louder than any declaration could. In that moment, the crowd erupted. Some cheered wildly, swept up in the poetry of rebellion. Others shouted in outrage. But Yibo remained still, a pillar against the storm, his fingers intertwined with Xiao Zhan's as if daring the world to pull them apart. Later, when the lights dimmed and the echoes of chaos faded, they stood together backstage. Xiao Zhan collapsed into Yibo's chest, his sobs muffled by the fabric of Yibo's jacket. "Why did you do that?" he whispered, voice shaking. "You know what it means. You know what they'll do to you." Yibo held him tighter, his chin resting gently against Xiao Zhan's damp hair. "Because walking away would have killed me," he said softly. "Because if the world needs someone to blame, let it be me. But you, I will never let them destroy you." The room seemed to dissolve around them, the tension and fear replaced by the fragile, incandescent glow of something eternal. Xiao Zhan's tears slowed, his trembling softened, and for the first time in weeks, his heart found rhythm again. He pulled back just enough to meet Yibo's eyes, and in that silent exchange was a vow stronger than any spoken word. Outside, headlines exploded like fireworks, dissecting every gesture, every glance. Critics sharpened their knives, fans wept or screamed, and the industry shifted uneasily under the weight of what had just unfolded. But none of it mattered in the small sanctuary where the two men stood, wrapped in the aftermath of courage. Wang Yibo had not walked away, and in refusing to do so, he had rewritten the story. It was no longer about scandal, nor about defeat. It was about love, unashamed, defiant, and eternal. A love that chose the fire and walked through it hand in hand. And for Xiao Zhan, who had nearly drowned in solitude, that single act was more than salvation. It was a promise carved into the marrow of his being, a reminder that even when the world demanded silence, love could still roar louder than the storm. The night would be remembered, replayed in headlines and videos for years to come, but its true essence would remain only with them. For it was not about spectacle, it was about two souls standing where the world could see, daring to be unbroken, daring to be together. And as dawn approached, washing the city in pale light, Xiao Zhan whispered the words that had been buried in his chest. "Thank you for staying." Yibo's hand found his again, their fingers locking with ease, with finality. He looked at him with that quiet fire, the kind that does not burn out. Always. The city never forgot that night. Screens across China replayed the image. Wang Yibo, hand in hand with Xiao Zhan, his expression fierce, unyielding, almost reckless in its tenderness. It was a picture that sparked wars online, dividing fans, brands, and the industry itself. But behind the doors of that glittering stage, the reality was quieter, heavier, soaked in breathless silence. Backstage, Xiao Zhan sat slumped on the couch, his palms pressed against his face as if to hide from himself. His heart beat erratically, each thud a reminder of what Yibo had just done. He could still feel the warmth of his hand, the strength in his grip, as though the touch itself had burned a permanent scar into his skin. "Yibo," he whispered into the fabric of his sleeves, trembling. "Why would you do that? You don't understand. They'll come for you now. For us." From across the room, Yibo leaned against the wall, arms crossed, calm in appearance but seething with emotion inside. He watched Xiao Zhan, the slight curve of his shoulders, the way his frame seemed weighed down by invisible chains. It broke him. Slowly, Yibo walked over, crouching before him until their eyes met. "I do understand," Yibo said softly, his voice carrying a steadiness Xiao Zhan had lost. "I've watched you drown every day, and I stood by while you carried it alone. I told myself it was to protect us. But tonight, when I saw you on that stage, alone," his voice cracked, and for the first time, his eyes softened, vulnerable, "I realized it wasn't you who needed saving, it was me. Because walking away from you would have killed me more than their hate ever could." Xiao Zhan's chest constricted. He wanted to argue, to remind him of contracts, endorsements, the invisible hands that governed their every move. But his lips betrayed him, quivering with unshed words. He simply broke down, letting Yibo pull his trembling body into an embrace that felt like both surrender and salvation. Outside, chaos brewed. Phones buzzed with urgent messages, agents screamed into headsets, brands threatened to sever ties, and hashtags ignited like wildfire across social media. Some cursed Yibo's recklessness. Others called it the bravest act of love they had ever seen. Yet in the small room where two hearts beat as one, the storm was a distant echo. Days turned into nights, and nights blurred into mornings. The world was merciless, their names trending endlessly, dissected with surgical precision. Paparazzi camped outside their homes, reporters demanded explanations, fans argued like warriors defending or condemning their idols. One evening, as rain lashed against the windows, Xiao Zhan stood in his apartment, staring at the flood of news on his phone. His name and Yibo's were woven together, inseparable now. He felt sick, terrified. "They're destroying you because of me," Xiao Zhan whispered when Yibo arrived, dripping from the rain. His voice was broken, stripped of defenses. "You should let go. You should save yourself before it's too late." Yibo stepped closer, peeling off his jacket, his hair damp, his eyes sharp with fire. "Don't ever say that again." His words cut the air like lightning. "I chose this. I chose you. Do you think I'd regret it?" He took Xiao Zhan's chin in his hand, forcing him to meet his gaze. "The only thing I would regret is leaving you. So stop asking me to." Tears burned Xiao Zhan's eyes, but Yibo kissed them away before they could fall, his lips lingering, trembling, desperate. It was a kiss that tasted of rain and rebellion, of love too wild to be caged. Xiao Zhan clung to him, his body giving way to the gravity of Yibo's determination. The months ahead were merciless. Contracts vanished, whispers turned into open attacks, doors once wide open began to slam shut. Yet every time Xiao Zhan's strength faltered, Yibo's hand was there, steady, unyielding, like a vow carved into eternity. They walked together into the fire, each public appearance a battle, each smile a silent rebellion. One night, a charity gala brought them into the spotlight again. The hall glittered with chandeliers, the crowd polished with wealth and influence. Xiao Zhan, dressed in a suit that shimmered subtly under the lights, felt the weight of eyes piercing him like daggers. His hands shook as he raised a glass for the toast, but before he faltered, Yibo's hand brushed his, quick, fleeting, but enough to steady him. Later, as they stood on the balcony overlooking the city, Xiao Zhan whispered, "Sometimes I think we're fools, trying to fight a world that will never let us be." Yibo slid behind him, arms wrapping around his waist, his chin resting on Xiao Zhan's shoulder. The city stretched endlessly before them, alive with neon, alive with noise, yet in that moment it felt like they were the only two people breathing. "Then let us be fools," Yibo murmured, his voice warm against Xiao Zhan's ear. "Because I'd rather be a fool with you than a king without you." The words cracked something open inside Xiao Zhan. He turned, his lips finding Yibo's in a kiss that silenced doubt, that bound them tighter than any contract, any chain. The city roared beneath them, but they stood above it, their love unbroken, unashamed. Time would pass. The world would never fully soften, never fully forgive. But it no longer mattered. For Yibo had made his stand not once, but every day since that night, the night he refused to walk away. And Xiao Zhan had learned to let himself be held, to believe in the impossible weight of a love that defied everything. They would walk into storms again. They would bleed under the judgment of strangers. But hand in hand, their steps would echo like a heartbeat across the silence, unafraid, unbroken. For what is love, if not the courage to stand when the world demands you fall? And Wang Yibo had chosen, again and again, to stand for Xiao Zhan. To stand with him. To stand as love itself, fierce as fire, gentle as dawn.